My name is Ling. I am 33 years old this year, and if you had met me not too long ago, you probably would have thought I was living a simple, ordinary life, the kind of life that doesn't stand out, but feels steady enough to hold on to. I had a husband, a small child, and a place to call home. Not our own house, no, but still a home where every morning began with familiar sounds, and every night ended with a sense of quiet routine. We lived with my husband's parents in a small province, far from the chaos of big cities, where life moved slower and people believed that as long as you worked hard and stayed together, things would somehow be okay. Our house wasn't large, but it was always full of small, comforting noises, the clinking of bowls and chopsticks at breakfast, the hum of the television in the evening, my child's laughter echoing across the yard as he ran barefoot under the fading light. Those were the moments that made me believe we were safe, that no matter how average our lives were, we had something real, something stable. My husband, Tuan, was not the kind of man who spoke a lot, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made me trust him without question. He worked at a private bank, earning around 20 million a month. It wasn't a fortune, but in our town, it was enough to build a future on, or at least that's what I believed back then. I never doubted his ability to take care of us. I never questioned the way he made decisions, because in my mind, he understood money. He worked in finance. He knew the risks and the limits far better than I ever could. And maybe that was my first mistake, believing that knowledge automatically meant safety. As for me, I stayed at home to take care of our child. Some people might think it was an easy life, but it wasn't. It was a choice made quietly, without complaints, because our child needed me, and because deep down I believed that as long as one of us remained stable, the family would stay balanced. I told myself that there would be time later to think about my own career, my own independence. For now, being a mother was enough, or at least that was what I convinced myself to believe. In the early years of our marriage, we had nothing. No savings, no financial support from either side of the family, just two people trying to build something from the ground up. Our wedding was simple, almost modest, and when it ended, reality came quickly. Bills, responsibilities, expectations, they didn't wait for us to be ready, but we adjusted. Slowly, quietly, we learned how to live within our means. Every expense was calculated, every plan carefully considered. There was no room for luxury, but there was also no overwhelming fear. Life was balanced, and in that balance, I found a kind of peace. Then, little by little, things started to change.
Not all at once. Not in a way that would make you stop and question everything, but gradually, like a shift so small you almost don't notice it until it's already happened. It began the day Tuan mentioned he was taking on some extra work. He didn't make it sound important, just something on the side, something related to his field, something that could bring in a bit more income. I remember asking him what exactly it was, and he gave me a simple answer, something about financial transactions, helping clients manage short-term loans. Nothing complicated, nothing dangerous. And I believed him, not because I understood, but because I trusted him. At that time, I didn't realize that trust can sometimes be the quietest form of risk. Months passed, and I started noticing small differences. Tuan came home later than usual. He spent more time on his phone, taking calls in a lower voice, sometimes stepping outside to talk. When I asked, he would just say it was work, that things were getting busier. There was nothing unusual about that. People work hard to earn more money. That's what I told myself. That's what I chose to believe. And then the money started coming in. Not dramatically at first, just enough to make life a little easier. I didn't have to calculate every expense of the market anymore. I could buy better food, nicer clothes for my child, small things that made daily life feel less heavy. Tuan seemed more confident too, more certain about the future. He talked about plans, not big, unrealistic dreams, but practical steps forward. And for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life where we wouldn't always have to worry about money. The day we bought the car felt like a turning point. It wasn't an expensive car, but to me it symbolized something bigger: progress, stability, proof that we were moving in the right direction. I remember sitting in the passenger seat, looking out the window, feeling a quiet pride that I didn't say out loud. My husband had done this. He had taken us from nothing to something, and I trusted that he knew exactly where he was going next. Not long after that, he bought another piece of land. That was when I hesitated, just for a moment. Something inside me felt uneasy, a small voice asking if things were moving too fast, if we were stepping beyond what we could safely hold. But that feeling didn't last, because every time doubt appeared, it was quickly replaced by trust. He worked in banking, he understood money, he knew what he was doing. Those thoughts became my reassurance, the way I silenced every question before it could grow into fear. Looking back now, I realize how dangerous that silence was. Because the truth is, I never really understood where the money was coming from. I never asked deeply enough to see the risks hidden beneath the surface. I only saw the results: the car, the land, the easier life, and I let those things convince me that everything was under control.
But stability built on something you don't understand is not stability at all. It's just a fragile illusion, waiting for the right moment to break. And when it breaks, it doesn't warn you. It doesn't give you time to prepare. It doesn't happen slowly. It happens all at once. There is always a moment, just one moment, when everything shifts. A moment you don't recognize until it has already passed, until you are standing on the other side of it, looking back and realizing that nothing will ever be the same again. For me, that moment came on a night that started like any other. The house was quiet. My child had already fallen asleep. Dinner was on the table, waiting. I remember checking the clock again and again, wondering why Tuan was so late. There was no reason to worry, not yet, but something in the silence of that evening felt different, heavier than usual. When he finally came home, I knew immediately that something was wrong. He didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me properly. He just walked in, sat down, and stayed there, as if all the strength had been drained out of him. I asked him what happened, but he didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until I felt my chest tighten with a kind of fear I couldn't explain. And then he spoke. Just one sentence. I lost it. In that moment, I didn't understand what he meant. But somehow, deep inside, I knew that whatever he had lost, it wasn't something small. It wasn't something we could simply fix and move on from. It was something that would change everything. And I was right.
At first, I didn't fully understand what he meant when he said, "I lost it." The words felt heavy, but unclear, like something too big for my mind to process all at once. I remember staring at him, waiting for him to explain, hoping, almost desperately, that it wasn't as bad as it sounded. But deep down, there was already a quiet fear forming, spreading slowly through my chest, telling me that this was not something small, not something we could fix overnight. Tuan didn't look at me when he finally spoke again. His voice was low, strained, as if each word had to fight its way out. He told me everything, about his boss, the man he trusted completely, the one who had been working alongside him at the bank, the one who had convinced him that this opportunity was safe, controlled, guaranteed. He told me how he had stood as a guarantor for a loan, 2 billion, and how that man had disappeared without a trace. No warning, no explanation, just gone. And with him, all the money. I sat there, listening, but it felt like the room was closing in around me. 2 billion. It wasn't just a number anymore. It was something alive, something suffocating, pressing down on us with a weight I couldn't escape. I tried to ask questions, but my thoughts were scattered, my voice shaking in ways I couldn't control. What do we do now? That was the only thing I could say, over and over again, like a broken record searching for an answer that didn't exist. Tuan didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, staring at nothing, his face pale, his shoulders heavy, like a man who had already been pushed to the edge and didn't know how much further he could go. The days that followed were a blur of panic and desperate decisions. The interest alone was nearly 100 million a month. It was a number that didn't belong in our life, a number that felt unreal, until it became something we had to face again and again, every single month. We didn't have time to think, to plan, to breathe. Everything became urgent. Everything became about survival. The first thing we did was sell the car. I remember watching it drive away, feeling something inside me collapse quietly. It wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of everything we thought we had achieved, everything we believed we had built. And just like that, it was gone. Then we talked about selling the land, but the market had dropped. Prices were falling, buyers were hesitant, and every offer we received felt like a loss too big to accept. Selling at that moment would mean giving up almost everything we had worked for, and still not being enough to cover the debt completely. We were trapped between bad choices, each one leading to another kind of loss. That was when Tuan started changing, not suddenly, but slowly, in ways that were hard to describe but impossible to ignore. He spoke less, he slept less.
Some nights, I would wake up and find him sitting alone in the dark, his face lit only by the faint glow of his phone, his eyes distant, like he was somewhere else entirely. I wanted to help. I really did, but I didn't know how. I didn't understand the numbers, the systems, the options he was considering. All I could do was watch as the man I trusted most slowly carried more and more weight on his shoulders until it felt like he might break under it at any moment. And then one day, he said something that made my heart drop in a way I had never felt before. He said, "We need more money." I didn't answer right away. I think a part of me already knew what he was going to ask next. He hesitated, just for a second, before saying it. "I need you to take a loan, under your name, 1 billion. The room went completely silent after that. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, like it was trying to escape my chest. I looked at him, searching his face for something. Certainty, reassurance, anything that could make this feel less terrifying. But all I saw was desperation. "Why me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because he couldn't take more loans under his name. Because we had run out of options. Because I was the only one left who could carry this burden. He didn't say those words directly, but they were there, hanging between us, impossible to ignore. I didn't say yes right away. For the first time in our marriage, I hesitated in a way that felt real, solid, unavoidable. It wasn't doubt in him. It was fear for myself, fear for my future, fear for everything I didn't fully understand, but knew could go wrong. "What if something happens?" I asked quietly. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded smaller, weaker, like it belonged to someone else. Tuan closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. "There's no other way," he said. Those words didn't comfort me. They didn't reassure me. They felt like a wall, closing in, leaving no space to turn back. I knew what would happen if I refused. The debt would collapse immediately. The pressure would explode. And we wouldn't just lose money. We could lose the house, the place my child was growing up in, the only stable thing left in our lives. So I signed. 1 billion. My name, my responsibility. For a brief moment, it felt like we had regained control. The external debt was paid off. The terrifying interest was reduced. But that relief didn't last long, because what replaced it was something quieter, heavier, and more persistent. 2 bank loans, 35 million in monthly interest. It was lower than before, but still far beyond what we could handle. And this time, the pressure wasn't explosive. It was constant, endless, like a slow leak that drained everything we had, day by day. Life after that became something I could barely recognize.
Every morning started with anxiety, a weight in my chest that never fully disappeared.
Every night ended with the same thought circling in my head, over and over again, refusing to let me rest. Tuan changed even more. He stopped talking about the future completely. No plans, no dreams, no what-ifs. Just numbers, just calculations, just the next payment, and the one after that. I started to feel like we weren't living anymore. We were just surviving from one deadline to the next. And then came the moment that pushed everything even further. Tuan told me he had found a solution. I didn't like the way he said that word. It didn't sound like hope. It sounded like surrender. He explained that we should let one of the loans go, the one under my name. If we stopped paying, the bank would seize the collateral, and we would reduce about $15 million in monthly interest. I felt my body go cold. But that means I'll have bad credit, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. He nodded, slowly, quietly, like he already knew what that meant for me. Bad credit. It wasn't just a financial term anymore. It was a mark, something that could follow me for years, limiting my ability to rebuild, to recover, to start over. It meant closing doors I hadn't even thought about yet. And yet, there we were, considering it as an option. Not because we wanted to, but because we felt like we had no choice. If we don't do this, he said, we won't survive. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say there had to be another way. But the truth was, I couldn't see one. Every direction we looked led to another dead end. Every option came with a cost too high to accept, and yet we were being forced to choose anyway. I thought that was the lowest point, that nothing could feel worse than this. But I was wrong, because there was still one more thing. Tuan hesitated before saying it. That alone was enough to make my heart sink. There's something else, he said. I looked at him, already afraid of what was coming next. We should get divorced. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words didn't make sense. Not in that context. Not after everything we had been through together. What? I asked, my voice shaking. He explained quickly, almost too quickly, like he was afraid I would stop him before he finished. It wouldn't be real, he said. Just on paper. We would still live together, still be a family. But if financial issues or bad credit affected him, his job at the bank could be at risk. I sat there, unable to move, unable to think clearly. A fake divorce, a legal separation to protect his career, to protect what little stability we had left. It sounded logical, in a cold, distant way, but emotionally, it felt like something inside me was being torn apart. Because no matter how you explain it, no matter how practical it sounds, a divorce is still a divorce. A line drawn, a title erased, a bond reduced to something unofficial, unrecognized, fragile. That night, I didn't sleep.
I lay there, staring into the darkness, listening to the quiet breathing of my child beside me, and wondering how we had ended up here. How a life that once felt stable, even if modest, had turned into something so uncertain, so heavy, so close to breaking. And for the first time, I realized something I had been avoiding all along. This wasn't just a temporary crisis. This was a turning point, and whatever choices we made next would follow us for the rest of our lives.
People often think that divorce is the end of a relationship, the moment when everything breaks apart and two people walk away from each other. But what I learned is that sometimes the most painful kind of separation is not the one where you leave, but the one where you stay. where you continue living under the same roof, breathing the same air, sharing the same silence, while a single piece of paper quietly erases what you once were to each other. I never thought I would be someone who signs divorce papers while still loving my husband. I never imagined that love would one day stand behind legal decisions, behind financial pressure, behind survival. But life has a way of pushing you into corners you never knew existed, forcing you to choose not between right and wrong, but between loss and a different kind of loss. And sometimes there is no choice that leaves you whole. After that night, everything felt different, even before anything had officially changed. The house was still the same, the routine was still there, my child still laughed and ran through the yard like nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted. Something quiet, something invisible, but impossible to ignore. I started looking at Don differently, not because I loved him less, but because I suddenly saw how fragile everything around us had become. Love, trust, stability, all the things I once believed were solid, now felt like they were balancing on the edge of something I couldn't control. We didn't talk much about the divorce after that, not because it wasn't important, but because it was too real, too heavy. Every time the topic came close, it brought with it a silence that neither of us knew how to break. It wasn't anger, it wasn't blame, it was something deeper than that, a shared understanding that we were both being pulled into something we didn't want, but couldn't avoid. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure didn't go away. The loans were still there, the interest still came, month after month, like a reminder that time wasn't on our side. We started making smaller changes, cutting down every possible expense, trying to hold on to whatever we could. But no matter how much we reduced, it never felt like enough. The numbers didn't care about effort. They didn't care about exhaustion. They only moved in one direction, and that direction was slowly closing in on us. I began to think more about the loan under my name, about what it meant if we let it go, about the word bad credit, and how quietly destructive it could be. It wasn't something you could see, not something that would show up immediately in your daily life, but it would follow you, limit you, define what you could or couldn't do in the future. It was like a shadow, something that stayed with you long after the moment that created it had passed.
And yet, every time I tried to hold on to that future, I was pulled back into the present, into the reality that we might not even survive long enough to worry about it. Tuan carried his own weight in silence. I could see it in the way he moved, the way he avoided eye contact sometimes, the way he stayed awake long after everyone else had gone to sleep. He blamed himself. I knew that without him saying a word. And part of me wanted to take that burden away from him, to tell him that it wasn't entirely his fault, that he had been deceived, that anyone in his position might have made the same decision. But another part of me, the quieter, more honest part, knew that none of that changed where we were now. We were still here, still trapped between debt and decisions, still standing on something that could collapse at any moment. And then came the day we had to face it. The paperwork, the signatures, the moment when something that had only been discussed in whispers became real. I remember holding the pen in my hand, staring at the document in front of me, feeling like I was looking at someone else's life. My name was there. His name was there. Everything was written clearly, officially, coldly. No emotions, no explanations, just facts. Just a decision reduced to ink on paper. I hesitated, not because I didn't understand why we were doing this, but because in that moment, everything we had been through together came rushing back. The early days of our marriage, when we had nothing but still felt strong. The nights we stayed up talking about the future. The small victories, the quiet happiness, the belief that as long as we were together, we could handle anything. All of that, condensed into a single moment, where I had to decide whether to let a piece of paper redefine us. Tuan didn't rush me. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, waiting. And that silence said more than any words could. It said that he was just as broken as I was, that this wasn't a choice he wanted, but a choice he believed we had to make. And in that moment, I realized something that hurt more than anything else. We weren't doing this because we stopped loving each other. We were doing this because we were trying to survive. So I signed, just like that. No dramatic moment, no tears falling onto the paper, just a quiet, steady motion,
as if my body had already accepted something my heart was still struggling to understand. And when it was done, nothing around me changed. The room was the same, the air felt the same, the world didn't stop. But inside me, something closed. We walked out of that place side by side, just like we always had. We went home together. We ate at the same table. We spoke in the same familiar way. If someone looked at us from the outside, they wouldn't see anything different. We were still a family, still living together, still sharing a life. But the truth was, something invisible had shifted, and there was no way to undo it.
I started to understand that consequences don't always come loudly. Sometimes they arrive quietly, settling into your life, changing the way you see things, the way you feel things, the way you carry yourself every single day. The debt was still there, the pressure was still there, but now there was something else too, something harder to define, a distance, not physical, but emotional, not because we wanted it, but because something had been altered in a way we couldn't fully repair. And yet, we continued, because life doesn't stop for you to process your pain, because responsibilities don't disappear just because you feel broken, because a child still needs to be raised, still needs laughter, still needs a sense of normalcy that you try your best to protect, even when your own world feels unstable. There are nights now when I lie awake and think about everything that happened, not with anger, not even with regret, but with a kind of quiet awareness. I think about the moment we chose to trust, the moment we chose to risk, the moment we chose to sign. Each decision, small on its own, but together, leading us here. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this: life doesn't collapse in a single moment. It breaks slowly, decision by decision, until one day you wake up and realize you are standing in the middle of something you never thought would be your reality. And by then, it's too late to go back. But even then, you keep going. Not because you are strong, not because you are unbreakable, but because you have no other choice. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in that quiet persistence, there is still a small piece of hope. Not the kind that promises everything will be okay, but the kind that whispers, "You will survive this, even if it changes you forever."